Number 5. Knock in the Night. The first creepypasta comes from Reddit user Moonbakes and tells the story of a woman and her husband who decide to stay the weekend at her grandpa's cabin. The husband is making jokes about Slenderman on the drive up, which the wife doesn't appreciate. Things start going off the rails when they're watching TV and they start to hear a strange scratching sound, which they at first think must just be rats in the attic. Here is an excerpt from the story. The sound suddenly stops and doesn't start up again. So after an hour, we go to bed. The next morning, I go outside to grab more firewood. Curiosity gets the better of me, and I decide to go look at the side of the cabin where I heard the banging, and what I see immediately makes me want to puke. Sure, the sound was rats being nailed to the wall. There are half-eaten rat carcasses all over the wall, surrounded by the same scratch marks that I had seen the day before. That was enough for me. I start yelling for my husband to show him. "Whoa, that's messed up," he says when I show him. "I want to leave, like today. I don't want to stay another night." He makes another joke about Slenderman and tells me we'll be fine. If it makes you feel safer, we'll shut all the window and door coverings. Just as the night before, as we're sitting down watching television, I hear the dragging, scratching, and knocking. I sit there petrified. My husband yells, "Stop it, whoever you aren't funny." Just as he says that, the knocking intensifies, and we hear a deep growling through the cracks in the wood. Puffs of breath say in a crackling, inhuman voice, "Come out to play with me." Whatever is out there laughs in that horrible voice for hours, knocking and knocking all over the house, claws scratching the walls, rattling the doors and window coverings, trying so hard to get them open. The house is covered in torn in half animals. Raccoons, squirrels, foxes. There's even half a deer on the deck. The couple then makes a break for it, but not before grabbing the motion-sensitive nature camera that has been set up. I won't spoil what's on it, but this is one worth checking out. Number 4. The Thing in the Yard. Our next creepypasta is by a writer with an amazing username, At Least I'm Genre Savvy. It tells the story about a teenage girl who agrees at the last minute to cover her friend's babysitting shift. At first, things seem normal. The little girl she's sitting for is practicing her reading, eats dinner, and then is sent to bed. The babysitter then turns on the TV to pass the time before the parents return. But the television's reception suddenly cuts out. Here's an excerpt from The Thing in the Yard. The screen filled with white static. I was flipping confusedly through the channels when Emma came into the room, dragging along her blankie. "There's a monster outside my room," she said in a small, shaky voice. Her face was pale, and I noticed that she was shivering. I turned and glanced out the window behind me. The waning moon was half hidden by clouds, but it was still light enough for me to see the backyard. The Callahan's backyard was large and bordered on a thickly wooded area. A knee-high stone fence separated the yard from the woods. There was a small plastic playhouse in the center of the yard. Something was standing next to it. It stood on 2 legs like a person, but seemed too tall and gangly. The legs were abnormally long. I didn't get a good look at it as it turned and darted into the woods, stepping over the fence, as if it wasn't even there. I didn't want to believe that I'd seen it. Heck, if Emma hadn't started screaming, I think I would have been able to convince myself that I had just imagined it. I grabbed Emma, pulling her close to me and trying to shush her. My mind was racing, but I knew one thing. I needed to call the police. The TV suddenly flipped back on. The screen showed Emma's empty bedroom. It was as if a camera had been set up outside of her closed bedroom window. A low, gravelly voice spoke. "We are coming." Number 3, the abandoned elementary school. This next story by Reddit user Stillakilla tells the story of a man who is driving home with his boss when he sees a strange figure standing in the field by a school. He drops off his boss and returns to the site and takes a video of the strange figure in the field. But when he gets back home, the footage has been corrupted. Still recording, I stop the car in front of the school and examine the man closer. Not before locking my doors and rolling the windows up. He was a larger man, tall but hunched over more than 90 degrees, but not looking downward. His skin was extremely pale, and even in the orange light, I could see the whiteness of his skin tone. He wore a dirty black trench coat, black pants, black boots, and what looked like a black top hat or fedora. The man was walking aimlessly and looking as if he was having some sort of mental breakdown. He was waving something around and hitting things, and I realized he was blind, and he was waving around a walking stick. I figured I should help out considering he looked lost and confused, So I turn into the school's parking lot with my high beams pointed directly at the man. The camera was still going. He paused for a second, looked up toward my car, and stopped hunching over. Standing straight all of a sudden, he was over 7 feet tall. He stood like a deer in headlights, and the lights seemed to almost reflect off of his face, so I wasn't able to see the details. Suddenly, he started sprinting full speed toward my car. What happens next? Well, you'll have to read for yourself to find out. Number 2, don't visit haunted cemeteries at midnight. Just don't. Next, we have a story by the Redditor, Already Awesome. It tells the story of a group of friends who decide that they want a really good scare. They pitch a few ideas of what to do, one of which being visiting the local cemetery, which has a reputation for being haunted. Here's an excerpt. At this point, we decided to hold a contest. We'd break out a lantern in the middle of the cemetery, and each of us would break out in different sides of the cemetery by ourselves. Whoever could stand out in the pitch blackness the longest would be the winner. Smart, right? So we did. I ended up walking toward the rear of the cemetery while my 2 other friends walked towards the sides. We were all expecting to be creeped out and then running back, but it didn't really end up that way. We all had nerves of steel and we just stood there. I was standing out there maybe 5 minutes when all of a sudden I hear a rustling in the woods. I tense, wondering who it was. I was betting it was my friends, them trying to make me change my pants, but no. I peer over the gate, beyond the cemetery, and this figure rises, a black outline, tall and thin, Slenderman. But instead of a blank face, he had my own. That's when I freaked out and ran. I screamed and ran towards the entrance. I jumped into my car, locked the doors, and started it. As I looked outside of the car one final time, I'm not seeing the figure, but I see that my friends left. We all drove our own cars, and mine was the only one in the parking lot. The young man manages to get away from the cemetery, but that doesn't mean Slenderman will leave him alone.